My name is Vivian Collins, and I am 32 years old. 5 years ago, I experienced the ultimate betrayal when I overheard my own mother convincing my boyfriend of 5 years to marry my younger sister instead of me. "Layla is stronger and better for you," she told him, breaking my heart into a million pieces. That day changed everything. I left my hometown with nothing but determination to build a new life. Now standing in my luxurious San Francisco home, watching my family's shocked expressions as they finally meet my husband, I realize that sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best revenge. Before I share how this all happened, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button and join me on this journey of heartbreak, resilience, and sweet, sweet justice. Growing up in Westbrook, Connecticut, I always knew I was different from the rest of my family. Our sprawling colonial house in an affluent neighborhood set the stage for what appeared to be the perfect American family. But appearances can be deceiving. My father, Thomas Collins, was a successful cardiovascular surgeon who spent most of his time at the hospital. When he was home, he retreated to his study, avoiding the emotional dynamics of our household. He was kind, but distant, a man who showed love through financial provision rather than emotional presence. My mother, Diana Collins, was the true force in our home. A former Miss Connecticut who never let anyone forget her glory days, she ruled our household with impossible standards of perfection. Her blonde hair was always impeccably styled, her clothes always designer brands, and her expectations always impossibly high. She had married well and saw her primary achievement as maintaining social status. Then there was my younger sister, Layla. 2 years my junior, she was everything I was not. Athletic, outgoing, and socially adept, Layla collected trophies for swimming and tennis, while I collected art supplies and books. She had inherited our mother's blonde beauty and social grace, while I had my grandmother Margaret's more subtle features and introspective nature. "Vivian, why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. Where Layla brought home swimming medals, I brought home sketches and poems. Where Layla had a wide circle of popular friends, I had a small group of equally artistic outcasts. "Art doesn't pay the bills, Vivian," my mother would say dismissively when she found me sketching instead of attending one of her society functions. "Layla understands how the world works." The contrast between us became the defining feature of our family dynamics. Each accomplishment of Layla's was celebrated with dinner parties and social media announcements. My achievements in art competitions or academic excellence were mentioned in passing, if at all. I still remember my senior year of high school when I won the National Young Artist Competition. The same week, Layla placed third in a regional swim meet. My mother threw a party for Layla's achievement, inviting half the town. My award received a cursory, "That's nice, dear," and was never mentioned again. Throughout these years, my grandmother Margaret was my salvation. My father's mother lived in a small cottage on the edge of town, filled with books and art. A former literature professor, she recognized my creative spirit and nurtured it when no one else would. "You have a gift, Vivian," she would tell me as we sat in her garden sketching the flowers. "Never let anyone convince you that your sensitivity is a weakness. It is your greatest strength." In her small cottage surrounded by impressionist paintings and first-edition classics, I found the acceptance I craved. Margaret taught me to value my own voice, even when it was drowned out at home by my mother's criticism and Layla's achievements. Despite the constant comparison and criticism, I excelled academically. While Layla was being groomed for social success and a strategically advantageous marriage, I focused on earning a scholarship to escape. My quiet determination paid off when I graduated as valedictorian of my class. Even that moment was tainted by my mother's reaction. As I delivered my speech to the graduating class and their families, I could see her in the audience checking her watch and whispering to Layla. Later, at what was supposed to be my celebration dinner, the conversation quickly turned to Layla's athletic scholarship offers. "Vivian did well, too," my father offered weakly when he noticed my silence. "Of course she did," my mother replied dismissively. "But Layla will be at Princeton with connections to all the right families. That's an investment in her future." The unspoken implication was clear. My academic achievement was expected, but unremarkable. Layla's athletic prowess was the real prize because it put her in proximity to wealth and status. By the time I left for college at NYU, I had developed a protective shell of anxiety and self-doubt. I chose NYU for its prestigious art program, using the scholarship I had earned to study graphic design against my mother's wishes. She had pushed for business or pre-law, something practical that could lead to financial security or an advantageous marriage. "Artists starve, Vivian," she warned as I packed for college. "Don't come crying to us when you can't pay your rent." I promised myself I wouldn't. No matter what happened, I would make my own way without their help. Little did I know then how completely I would have to keep that promise, or how betrayal would force me to rebuild my life from scratch. I met Ethan Williams in my sophomore year at NYU. We were both taking an elective course on art history. I was there because I loved the subject. He was there to fulfill a humanities requirement for his business degree. I noticed him immediately. Tall, with sandy hair and intelligent green eyes, he stood out in the lecture hall, not just for his looks, but for the thoughtful questions he asked. Unlike many of the business majors taking the class for an easy credit, Ethan seemed genuinely interested in learning about the cultural significance of art movements. Our first conversation happened in the university coffee shop after class. I was sketching in my notebook when he approached my table. "That's really good," he said, pointing to my drawing of the campus clock tower. "You captured the Gothic details perfectly." Coming from anyone else, I might have assumed it was a line, but there was a sincere appreciation in his voice that made me look up and really see him. Ethan came from a solidly middle-class family in Pennsylvania. His father was a high school math teacher, his mother an accountant. He had none of the pretension or status obsession I had grown up with. Instead, he had a genuine curiosity about the world and a refreshing authenticity. Our first date was simple, a walk through the Metropolitan Museum of Art, followed by hot dogs from a street vendor. I remember thinking how different it was from the formal status-conscious outings my mother had always insisted were proper dates. With Ethan, I felt seen for who I was, not measured against some impossible standard. As we walked through the museum, I was surprised by how much he knew about art for a business major. "My mom loves taking us to museums," he explained. "She always said understanding art helps you understand people better." By the time we graduated, we had been inseparable for nearly 3 years. We rented our first apartment together in Brooklyn, a tiny walk-up with perpetually undependable heating but huge windows that flooded the space with light. I turned one corner into a makeshift studio where I worked on freelance design projects while building my portfolio. Ethan started his career at a mid-size financial consulting firm. He wasn't making huge money, but he was on a solid path. I landed a job at a boutique design agency in Manhattan, specializing in branding for small businesses. We weren't rich, but we were happy and building something together. When I brought Ethan home to meet my family for the first time, my mother's disapproval was immediate, though carefully disguised behind her perfect hostess smile. "Consulting is such an interesting field," she said with the slight emphasis that I knew meant she found it lacking. "Is there a clear path to partnership?" Later, when Ethan was talking with my father, she cornered me in the kitchen. "He seems nice enough, Vivian, but there's no real ambition there. You could do better." By better, I knew she meant wealthier, more connected, more status appropriate. The fact that Ethan made me happier than I had ever been was irrelevant to her calculus of what constituted a suitable match. Over the next 2 years, however, Ethan's career began to take off. He was recognized for his analytical skills and moved to a more prestigious firm with better clients and significantly higher pay. As his professional stature grew, my mother's attitude toward him shifted noticeably. Suddenly, Ethan was invited to family events, even when I had deadlines and couldn't attend. My mother began calling him directly instead of through me. At first, I was pleased that she was finally accepting him, never suspecting there was something more calculated in her sudden interest. "Your mother invited me to that charity gala next month," Ethan mentioned casually one evening. "She said you're probably too busy with your art stuff, but that I shouldn't miss the networking opportunity." I felt a flicker of unease, but pushed it aside. After 5 years together, Ethan and I had discussed marriage often. I was certain he was planning to propose on our upcoming anniversary, especially when he suggested we take a day off to celebrate. "Wear something nice," he said with a secretive smile. "I have something special planned." The week before our anniversary, I noticed Ethan becoming increasingly distant. He was checking his phone more frequently and stepping out to take calls. I told myself it was work pressure, or perhaps last-minute details for whatever surprise he was planning. I had no idea that the foundation of my life was about to crumble beneath my feet. On the morning of our anniversary, I decided to surprise Ethan by coming home early from work. I had told him I had a client meeting until mid-afternoon, but it had been canceled at the last minute. I stopped by a bakery to pick up his favorite pastries, thinking we could start our celebration early. As I approached our apartment door, I heard voices inside. One was unmistakably Ethan's. The other, to my shock, was my mother's. I froze, key in hand, wondering what my mother was doing in our apartment when she was supposed to be in Connecticut. Confusion turned to dread as I caught fragments of their conversation. "She's too sensitive, too lost in her artistic dreams," my mother was saying. "Layla is stronger and better for you. She understands the importance of social connections, of building the right kind of life." There was a pause, and I held my breath, waiting for Ethan to defend me, to tell my mother she was wrong and ask her to leave. Instead, his response shattered my world. "I do care about Vivian," he said, his voice hesitant. "But sometimes I wonder if we want the same things in life. Her focus on art over financial stability concerns me." "Exactly," my mother pressed. "Layla has always understood the importance of practical matters. She admires you, you know. She always has." Another pause. "I hadn't realized," Ethan replied, sounding both surprised and flattered. "Just meet with her," my mother urged. "Have coffee, see for yourself. Vivian need never know we had this conversation." I don't remember consciously deciding to enter, but suddenly I was pushing open the door, the bakery box dropping from my numb fingers. The look on their faces when they saw me standing there would have been comical under any other circumstances. My mother recovered first, her social training kicking in as she smoothed her expression into one of maternal concern. "Vivian, darling, what a surprise. I thought you were working." Ethan looked like he might be sick. "Viv, I can explain. This isn't what it sounds like." "Really?" I said, my voice eerily calm, despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. "Because it sounds like my mother is trying to convince my boyfriend of 5 years to leave me for my sister. And it sounds like you're considering it." "Now, Vivian, don't be dramatic," my mother said, using the tone she always employed when I was being difficult. "I'm simply looking out for everyone's best interests. You and Ethan have different life goals. I was merely pointing that out." I turned to Ethan, still hoping there was some explanation, some way this wasn't the betrayal it appeared to be. "Is that true? Do we have different life goals? Because I thought we were building a life together. I thought we were happy." He couldn't meet my eyes. "We are happy mostly, but your mother raised some valid points about our compatibility long term, and apparently Layla has expressed interest in getting to know me better." "Expressed interest," I echoed, disbelief washing over me. "She's my sister. You're my boyfriend. How is this even a conversation?" "See, this emotional reaction is exactly what I mean," my mother interjected smoothly. "Layla would handle this conversation rationally." I felt like I was drowning, watching my life from somewhere outside my body. A terrible suspicion formed in my mind. "Let me see your phone," I said to Ethan. "What? No, that's private," he protested, but his hand instinctively moved to his pocket, where his phone made a slight bulge. In that moment, I knew. "You've already been talking to her, haven't you?" His silence was answer enough. With speed born of adrenaline, I lunged forward and grabbed his phone before he could stop me. He hadn't even bothered to lock the screen. There it was, a text conversation with Layla spanning weeks. Flirtatious messages, inside jokes, plans to meet for coffee 2 days ago. "You went out with her while we were together." My voice broke on the last word. "It was just coffee," Ethan said weakly. "To talk." I scrolled up through the messages, each one a fresh wound. There were dozens of them going back much further than I had imagined. "Layla missed seeing you at family dinner last Sunday. Mom says you're coming this weekend, though. Ethan wouldn't miss it. Vivian has that art show thing, but I'll be there. Layla perfect. Mom's making your favorite dessert. And I have that tennis story to finish telling you." The casual intimacy of their exchanges made me physically ill. I dropped the phone as if it had burned me. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Neither answered. My mother looked almost satisfied, like a chess player whose strategy was working perfectly. Ethan looked guilty, but also somewhat relieved, as if he'd been waiting to be caught. The next few days passed in a blur of confrontations and revelations. At a disastrous family dinner that weekend, my mother actually announced that Ethan and Layla should get to know each other better, as if I weren't sitting right there at the table. My father, as usual, said nothing, examining his plate with sudden interest. Only my grandmother Margaret spoke up. "Have you lost your mind, Diana?" she demanded, her normally gentle voice sharp with anger. "What kind of mother tries to steal her daughter's boyfriend for her other daughter?" "Don't be melodramatic, Mother," Diana replied coolly. "No one is stealing anyone. I'm simply acknowledging what we all see. Ethan and Layla are better suited. Vivian will find someone more appropriate for her temperament." I looked around the table at my family. My father avoiding conflict as always, my mother orchestrating my humiliation, my sister pretending concern while reaching for what was mine, and Ethan, the man I thought I would marry, sitting there allowing it all to happen. Later that week, Layla came to apologize in that non-apologetic way that placed the blame squarely on me. "I never meant for this to happen, Viv," she said, twisting her golden hair around one finger. "But you have to admit you and Ethan want different things. He's ambitious. You're so caught up in your art that you don't see what he needs." I stared at my sister, trying to recognize the little girl who had once played dolls with me in our shared bedroom. "And you know what he needs?" She had the grace to look momentarily ashamed before recovering with a shrug. "I understand his world better than you do. We make more sense together." The final breaking point came a month after I discovered the betrayal. I had moved in with a friend, temporarily unable to bear living with Ethan, but not quite ready to give up our shared apartment. Foolishly, I had hoped he might come to his senses. Instead, I returned to collect more of my belongings and found him and Layla on our couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her, watching a movie. In our home, on the couch we had picked out together. Something inside me finally snapped. I realized there was nothing left for me in Connecticut, no relationship worth salvaging, no family loyalty to honor, nothing but the certainty that I would wither away if I stayed. That night I made my decision. I would leave everything behind and start fresh somewhere entirely new, somewhere far from the betrayal and humiliation, somewhere I could rebuild myself from the ground up. I left Connecticut on a Tuesday morning in October. The trees were turning brilliant shades of red and gold, a beautiful backdrop for the ugliness I was leaving behind. I had packed only what would fit in my Honda Civic clothes, my portfolio art supplies, and a few cherished books. Everything else I left behind. My only goodbye was to Grandmother Margaret. I drove to her cottage at dawn, and she was waiting for me on the porch, as if she had known I would come. "I'm leaving," I told her simply as we sat drinking tea in her kitchen for the last time. She nodded, unsurprised. "Where will you go?" "San Francisco. It's as far as I can get without leaving the mainland." I had always been drawn to the city's creative energy and diversity, so different from the stifling conformity of Westbrook. Margaret disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a small wooden box. "These belong to my mother," she said, opening it to reveal an antique emerald ring and matching earrings. "They should have been yours eventually anyway. Take them. Sell them if you need to." "Grandma, I can't." "You can and you will." Her voice was firm. "I'm too old to fight your mother anymore, but I can give you the means to escape her. There's also $5,000 in this envelope. Don't argue," she added as I tried to protest. "Consider it an investment in the woman you're going to become." We hugged goodbye, both of us crying. "You're stronger than all of them, Vivian," she whispered. "Don't let them convince you otherwise." Those words became my mantra during the long drive across the country. I repeated them when I had to sleep in my car to save money. I repeated them when I got caught in a snowstorm in Colorado. I repeated them when I finally drove across the Bay Bridge and saw San Francisco spread out before me like a new world. Reality hit hard when I started apartment hunting. Even the smallest studios were shockingly expensive. I spent my first 2 weeks in a youth hostel stretching my budget while searching for something affordable. Eventually, I found a tiny studio in the Mission District. It was barely larger than my walk-in closet back home, with questionable plumbing and neighbors who argued loudly in Spanish at all hours, but it was mine. Finding work proved equally challenging. My portfolio, which had seemed impressive in New York, was met with indifference by San Francisco agencies. "Too East Coast," one creative director told me. "Not innovative enough," said another. My savings dwindled alarmingly. I took a job waiting tables at a busy restaurant in the financial district, serving overpriced cocktails to tech workers while sending out my resume every night after my shift ended. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was serving drinks to exactly the kind of ambitious, status-conscious people my mother had always wanted me to become. After 3 months of rejection, I was ready to admit defeat when I got an email from Jade Walker, a junior art director at Pixel, a small but growing design agency. She had seen my online portfolio and liked my fresh perspective. The position was entry-level with minimal pay, but it was in my field. I accepted immediately. Jade quickly became not just a colleague, but my first real friend in San Francisco. A Berkeley graduate with purple hair and a sleeve of tattoos, she was everything Westbrook would have considered inappropriate, which made me like her all the more. "Your work has soul," she told me bluntly on my first day. "But you're holding back, like you're afraid to really put yourself into it." She was right, of course. Years of having my creativity dismissed had taught me to hide my true artistic voice. With Jade's encouragement, I began taking more risks with my designs, incorporating more of the artistic elements I had always loved but had been taught to suppress. Parallel to rebuilding my career, I started the harder work of rebuilding myself. I found a therapist, Dr. Chen, who specialized in family trauma. Our weekly sessions became anchored points in my new life as I unpacked the patterns of emotional manipulation and conditional love that had shaped my childhood. "Your mother substituted her dreams for your reality," Dr. Chen observed in one session. "And when you refused to fulfill her expectations, she punished you by taking away what you loved." Those words illuminated so much about my relationship with Diana. She hadn't convinced Ethan to choose Layla because she thought they were better suited. She had done it to punish me for not being the daughter she wanted. 6 months into my new life, I discovered a community art center near my apartment that offered free workshops on weekends. I began volunteering there, teaching basic design skills to neighborhood kids. The joy I found in nurturing their creativity helped heal some of my own creative wounds. I maintained minimal contact with my family. Occasional calls with my father, who seemed relieved I was doing well, but never acknowledged the reason I had left. Rare calls with grandmother Margaret, who carefully avoided mentioning Layla and Ethan, but kept me updated on her garden and her book club. Then, scrolling through social media one evening, I saw the announcement of Layla and Ethan's engagement. There they were, smiling on the lawn of my parents' home, her hand extended to show off the diamond ring that had probably once been intended for me. My mother had tagged the post with #perfectmatch and #proudmama. I threw up in my bathroom sink, then deleted all my social media accounts. That night was my lowest point. I lay on my Murphy bed staring at the water stain on my ceiling that vaguely resembled Australia and questioned every decision I had made. Maybe my mother had been right. Maybe I was too sensitive, too artistic, too impractical to succeed or be loved properly. Maybe I should just go home, apologize, and accept my place as the family disappointment. I fell asleep clutching my grandmother's emerald ring, the one piece of family jewelry I had kept rather than selling. In my dreams, I heard her voice, "You're stronger than all of them, Vivian." The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt since arriving in San Francisco. I showered, dressed in my most professional outfit, and walked into my boss's office at Pixel. "I want to lead the Horizon Tech pitch," I announced without preamble. Mark, the agency's founder, looked up in surprise. Horizon was a rising tech company looking for a complete rebranding, by far the biggest potential client Pixel had ever pursued. The pitch was scheduled for the following month, and everyone assumed our senior art director would lead it. "That's Russell's project," Mark replied carefully. "Russell's work is solid but safe. Horizon wants innovation. I have ideas that will blow them away." The confidence in my voice surprised even me. Mark studied me for a long moment. "Show me what you've got by tomorrow morning. If it's as good as you claim, the project is yours." I worked through the night, channeling all my pain determination and newfound clarity into the pitch. The concepts I created were unlike anything I had ever done before, bold, emotional, and authentically me. I presented them to Mark the next morning, running on coffee and adrenaline. He was silent for a full minute after I finished. Then he smiled. "Well, looks like Russell is getting a new assignment. This pitch is yours." We won the Horizon account. My concepts didn't just impress the client, they excited them. The success led to a promotion to senior designer, then to associate creative director a year later. Other high-profile clients followed as word spread about the innovative work we were doing. 2 years after arriving in San Francisco, with nothing but a car full of belongings, I put a down payment on my first condo, a small but modern space in a converted industrial building with actual architectural details and not a single water stain on the ceiling. The night I moved in, Jade helped me unpack and brought champagne to celebrate. As we sat on my new couch surrounded by half-open boxes, she raised her glass in a toast. "To the badass who rebuilt her life from scratch," she said. "Your family has no idea what they threw away." For the first time, I truly believed she was right. Shortly after my promotion to Associate Creative Director, I received a surprise visitor. Grandmother Margaret, now 82, had flown across the country to see me. I picked her up at the airport, shocked by how frail she looked, but overjoyed to see her fierce spirit undimmed in her bright eyes. As we had tea in my new condo, she gave me the family update I had been avoiding. My father was still working too much. My mother was still focusing on social climbing. And Layla and Ethan. Their perfect marriage was showing cracks. "Your mother pushed them together without considering whether they actually suited each other," Margaret said, stirring honey into her tea. "Layla wanted him because he was yours, and Ethan was too weak to resist the flattery. Now they're finding out that relationships built on betrayal rarely thrive." I was surprised to find that the news brought me no pleasure. "I'm sorry they're unhappy," I said, and meant it. "But I'm not sorry I left." Margaret reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Neither am I, my dear. You've become exactly who you were meant to be, far from their shadow." 6 months after Grandmother Margaret's visit, Pixel landed the account that would change everything. NextGen, one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the world, wanted a complete rebranding to reflect their evolution from startup to industry leader. As creative director, I would be leading the pitch personally. The morning of the presentation, I arrived early at NextGen's sleek headquarters in Silicon Valley. The receptionist directed me to a conference room where I began setting up my presentation. I was reviewing my notes when the door opened and a man entered. My first impression was of quiet intensity. He wasn't conventionally handsome in the way Ethan had been with his all-American good looks. This man had sharp features, intelligent dark eyes behind stylish glasses, and an air of contained energy. He was clearly of Asian descent, dressed impeccably in a suit that managed to look both professional and slightly rebellious with its subtle blue pattern. "You must be Vivian Collins," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Alexander Chen, CEO of NextGen. I like to meet with agencies myself before the full presentation." I shook his hand, hoping mine wasn't clammy with sudden nervousness. "That's unusual for a CEO." "I'm an unusual CEO," he replied with a slight smile. "I believe branding is too important to delegate completely. It's the face we show the world." As we discussed his vision for NextGen, I was struck by how different he was from the tech executives I usually dealt with. Where they talked about market share and target demographics, Alexander spoke about emotional connection and authentic communication. He described technology as a means of human empowerment rather than an end in itself. "I don't want NextGen to just sell products," he explained, his passion evident. "I want us to improve lives in meaningful ways. Our branding should reflect that." "That's exactly the approach I've taken with the concepts I'll be presenting," I replied, growing excited as I realized we shared a similar philosophy. He leaned forward, eyes intent on mine. "Show me." It was unorthodox to present to the CEO alone before the scheduled meeting with the marketing team, but something told me this was an opportunity I shouldn't pass up. I launched into my presentation, explaining the concepts I had developed and the reasoning behind them. Alexander interrupted frequently, not with criticism, but with thoughtful questions that pushed me to articulate my ideas more clearly. By the time the marketing team arrived for the official presentation, we were deep in conversation about the emotional psychology of color in branding. The full presentation went smoothly, but it felt almost anticlimactic. I already knew from Alexander's reaction that we had connected on a fundamental level about the direction NextGen should take. 2 days later, Mark called me into his office grinning widely. NextGen wants us, and specifically you, to handle not just their rebranding, but all their creative work going forward. Alexander Chen personally requested you as the lead. The NextGen account transformed Pixel from a promising boutique agency to a significant player in the San Francisco design scene. As the relationship between our companies grew, so did my professional contact with Alexander. What began as weekly meetings about the rebranding evolved into brainstorming sessions that often ran late into the evening. Our first disagreement came during one such session. Alexander wanted to take the website design in a direction I felt conflicted with the overall brand strategy we had developed. It's too conventional, I argued. NextGen's whole ethos is about breaking new ground. But we need to consider user expectations, he countered. Too much innovation can alienate people. Your customers aren't looking for another conventional tech company, I insisted. They come to NextGen because you challenge assumptions. We went back and forth, neither willing to concede. It was the most direct I had ever been with a client, especially one as important as NextGen, but something about Alexander made me feel I could speak my mind without fear. Finally, he sat back and studied me with those intense, dark eyes. You know, most people don't argue with me. Is that because you're always right or because you're the CEO? I asked immediately, regretting my boldness. To my relief, he laughed a genuine sound of delight. Probably the latter. It's refreshing to be challenged. He tapped the mock-up I had been defending. Let's go with your approach. You've convinced me. After that, our professional relationship took on a new dimension of mutual respect. I discovered that beneath his successful CEO exterior, Alexander had his own story of family expectations and breaking free to forge his own path. Over dinner at a small Japanese restaurant, after a particularly productive meeting, he told me about growing up as the son of Chinese immigrants in Seattle. His parents had sacrificed everything to give him educational opportunities, expecting him to become a doctor or lawyer. When I told them I was dropping out of medical school to start a tech company, my father didn't speak to me for 2 years. He said, his expression somber. He saw it as throwing away everything they had worked for. But you succeeded beyond anything they could have imagined, I said. Success helps, but it doesn't erase the pain of disappointing the people who raised you. He met my eyes. I think you understand that. I found myself telling him about my own family, about Diana's manipulation and Layla's betrayal, about leaving everything behind to start over in San Francisco. I had never shared the full story with anyone except Jade and Dr. Chen, but something about Alexander's quiet attention made it feel safe to be vulnerable. So we're both refugees from family expectations, he said when I finished. Maybe that's why we understand each other's vision so well. Our working relationship gradually extended beyond the office. Alexander invited me to gallery openings, knowing my love of art. I introduced him to the community art center where I volunteered. We discovered a shared love of obscure foreign films and spicy food from around the world. I met his friends, a diverse group of innovators and creative thinkers who welcomed me warmly. For the first time since moving to San Francisco, I felt part of a community where I truly belonged. Despite our growing closeness, I kept a careful emotional distance. The betrayal by Ethan had left scars that made me wary of romantic involvement, especially with someone I worked with professionally. Alexander seemed to sense this and never pushed for more than friendship, though I sometimes caught him looking at me with an intensity that made my heart race. The crisis that changed everything came 6 months into the NextGen project. A competitor leaked information about NextGen's upcoming product launch, forcing us to completely revamp the marketing strategy with only 48 hours before the press conference. Alexander and I worked through the night in the Pixel conference room, fueled by takeout and determination. By dawn, we had created a completely new approach that turned the leak into an opportunity, playing up the revolutionary nature of the product that others were so eager to learn about. As the sun rose over the San Francisco skyline, casting golden light through the windows, we sat side by side reviewing the final presentation. We were both exhausted, disheveled, and exhilarated by what we had accomplished. "We make a good team," Alexander said softly, his shoulder touching mine as he leaned in to point out a detail on the screen. I turned to respond and found his face inches from mine. Time seemed to stop as we looked at each other, the professional boundaries we had maintained suddenly paper thin. "Vivian," he said my name almost a question. I answered by closing the distance between us. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepened, as 5 months of suppressed feelings finally broke free. When we finally pulled apart, I was trembling. "I've wanted to do that since the day we met," he admitted, his hand warm against my cheek. "Why didn't you?" I asked. "You weren't ready, and I was afraid of scaring you away." His honesty was disarming. "I'm still scared," I confessed. "My track record with relationships isn't great." "Mine either," he said with a wry smile. "But I think we've both learned from our mistakes. We could try going slowly, see where this leads." "Slowly," I agreed, even as I leaned in to kiss him again. Our relationship developed with the same thoughtful intention that characterized our professional collaboration. Alexander respected my need for independence and my lingering trust issues. I came to understand his workaholic tendencies and the pressure he felt as the public face of NextGen. 3 months after our first kiss, Alexander invited me to meet his family. Unlike my apprehension about introducing Ethan to Diana, I looked forward to meeting the people who had raised such an extraordinary man. The Chen family welcomed me with warmth that brought tears to my eyes. Alexander's father, once disappointed in his son's career choice, now beamed with pride as Alexander introduced me as both his creative director and his girlfriend. His mother insisted on teaching me to make dumplings in her kitchen, declaring that I was too skinny and needed proper feeding. "They love you," Alexander said as we drove back to the city that evening. "Even my grandmother asked when we're getting married, and she never approves of anyone." "Is that something you think about?" I asked cautiously. "Marriage, I mean." He took my hand, keeping his eyes on the road. "I think about building a life with you, whatever form that takes. There's no rush, Vivian. We have time to figure it out." His patience and understanding were so different from the pressure I had felt with Ethan, always trying to fit into someone else's expectations. With Alexander, I could simply be myself. 6 months into our relationship, Alexander suggested a weekend at his lake house in Tahoe. As we sat on the deck watching the sunset reflect on the water, he said the words I hadn't realized I was waiting to hear. "I love you, Vivian, not for what you can do or who you might become, but for exactly who you are right now." The simple truth of his words broke something open inside me. "I love you too," I replied, realizing I had never felt so certain of anything. That night, as we lay together under the stars, I finally felt the last pieces of my old life fall away. The betrayal that had driven me across the country had led me exactly where I needed to be. Alexander proposed on a Tuesday evening at the community art center where I volunteered. He had arranged for the children's art class I taught to help him, each child holding a letter that spelled out, "Will you marry me?" when they lined up together. As I stood there laughing and crying, Alexander knelt with a ring box containing not a diamond, but a sapphire, my favorite stone. "You've shown me what it means to be authentic and brave," he said. "Will you continue this journey with me as my wife?" For a heartbeat, I hesitated. Images of Ethan and Layla flashed through my mind, along with all the doubts about my worthiness that my mother had planted. Then I looked at the children's excited faces, at the man kneeling before me, who had never asked me to be anything other than myself, and at the life we had already begun building together. The answer was clear. "Yes," I said simply. "Yes to all of it." The next year brought changes I could never have imagined when I first arrived in San Francisco. Alexander and I launched a joint venture called Authentic Edge, combining his technological expertise with my design sensibility. The company focused on helping businesses develop authentic digital presences that reflected their true values rather than chasing trends. Authentic Edge quickly gained attention for our innovative approach. We were featured in business magazines and invited to speak at conferences. My artwork, which I had continued creating in my limited spare time, began appearing in local galleries. Everything I touched seemed to flourish, as if all the creativity that had been suppressed for years was finally finding expression. We bought a beautiful modern home in the hills overlooking the bay with a dedicated studio space where I could paint and a home office for late-night collaboration. Our lives intertwined professionally and personally in a partnership that felt equal and nurturing. As we discussed wedding plans, I faced the question I had been avoiding whether to invite my family. I hadn't spoken to my mother or Layla since leaving Connecticut. My father and I maintained minimal contact, mostly holiday calls and occasional emails. Only grandmother Margaret remained a constant presence in my life, though increasingly frail health prevented her from traveling. "It's your decision," Alexander assured me when I shared my conflicted feelings. "We can have a small ceremony with just our friends and my family, if that feels right to you." Before I could decide, I received heartbreaking news. Grandmother Margaret had suffered a stroke. Her neighbor found her in the garden she loved and called an ambulance, but the doctors weren't optimistic about her recovery. Alexander and I flew to Connecticut immediately. At the hospital, I was shocked by how small Margaret looked in the white hospital bed. Her vibrant spirit diminished but still visible in her eyes when she recognized me. "My Vivian," she whispered, her speech slurred from the stroke. "You came." "Of course I came," I said, taking her frail hand in mine. "I couldn't stay away." "Are you happy?" she asked, each word clearly an effort. "Yes, Grandma, truly happy." I introduced Alexander, who charmed her immediately with his gentle respect. "Good," she said, her eyes moving between us. "You deserve it, all of it." We stayed for 3 days until it became clear that Margaret was stabilizing. Before returning to San Francisco, we made arrangements for her care and promised to return soon. On the flight home, I made my decision. "I want a small private ceremony now, just us and our closest friends," I told Alexander. "We can have a larger reception later and invite my family to that if I'm ready." He understood without explanation. 2 weeks later, we were married in a simple ceremony in our backyard with only Alexander's family and our dearest friends in attendance. Margaret joined via video call from her rehabilitation center, her smile radiant despite her weakened condition. It was exactly the wedding I had always wanted, intimate, meaningful, and completely free of my mother's influence or expectations. Our honeymoon in Japan was a perfect blend of our interests, ancient temples and cutting-edge technology, traditional arts, and modern design. We returned to San Francisco, energized and ready for the next chapter of our lives together. As Authentic Edge continued to grow, so did my reconnection with my artistic roots. A gallery owner saw my personal work and offered me a small show. To my shock, all 15 paintings sold on opening night, leading to commissioned work and a second show scheduled for the following year. Life seemed perfect until a phone call in the middle of the night 6 months after our wedding. Margaret had suffered another stroke more severe than the first. By the time Alexander and I arrived in Connecticut, she was gone. The funeral brought me face to face with my family for the first time in nearly 5 years. My father looked older, more stooped, with new lines etched around his eyes. My mother was still impeccably put together, though I could see the effort it took now. Layla had cut her hair short and lost weight, the golden beauty of her youth sharpened into something harder. And Ethan. He stood slightly apart from Layla, his once confident posture now uncertain. When our eyes met across the funeral home, he quickly looked away. I introduced Alexander as my husband. My father shook his hand warmly, seeming genuinely pleased to meet him. My mother's eyes widened slightly as she recognized his name from business news. Alexander Chen of NextGen. How extraordinary. The calculation in her voice was unmistakable. "Vivian never mentioned she knew you." "We met through work," Alexander replied smoothly. "Vivian's talent changed the trajectory of my company." Later at the reception in my parents' home, I overheard my mother trying to explain our connection to her friends. "Of course we've known Alexander for some time," she lied. "Such a brilliant young man. We always knew Vivian would connect with someone special in her field. The audacity of her attempt to retroactively claim credit for my success might once have infuriated me. Now it merely saddened me. Diana would never change. My father found a moment to speak with me privately. "I'm sorry, Vivian," he said simply, "for everything, for not standing up for you, for letting your mother—" He trailed off, unable to name what she had done. "It's okay, Dad," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "I found my way." "You certainly did." He glanced toward Alexander, who was chatting easily with some distant cousins. "He seems like a good man. Are you happy?" "Happier than I ever imagined possible," I told him truthfully. As we prepared to leave, Ethan approached me hesitantly. "Could we talk for a minute? Privately?" I looked to Alexander, who nodded imperceptibly. "I'll wait by the car," he said, squeezing my hand. Ethan and I walked to the edge of the garden, away from the other guests. "You look wonderful," he began awkwardly. "Success agrees with you." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "How are you and Layla?" He flinched slightly. "We're managing. It's not what either of us expected." He paused. "Vivian, I need to apologize. What I did to you was unforgivable. I let myself be manipulated, and I hurt the best person I've ever known." 5 years ago, those words would have meant everything to me. Now they were just words from a man I barely recognized anymore. "I forgive you, Ethan," I said, realizing as I spoke that it was true. "Not for you, but for me. I don't want to carry that pain anymore." "Are you really happy with him?" Ethan asked, a note of disbelief in his voice. I smiled. "I'm happy with myself. Alexander is part of that happiness, but he's not its source. I found that on my own." On the flight back to San Francisco, I made another decision. "I want to have that reception we talked about," I told Alexander. "A celebration of everything we've built together. And yes, I want to invite my family." He searched my face. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Not for reconciliation, but for closure, and to show myself how far I've come." Planning our 5th anniversary and public wedding reception became a welcome distraction from the grief of losing Margaret. We decided to host it at our home, transforming the terraced garden into an elegant party venue with views of the Golden Gate Bridge. The guest list included the tech elite of Silicon Valley creative leaders from around the country, and yes, my family from Connecticut. I sent formal invitations to my parents and to Layla and Ethan, half expecting them to decline. To my surprise, they all accepted. My father called to confirm, mentioning that they would arrive a day early if that was convenient. "Your mother is quite excited to see your home," he added, an undercurrent of amusement in his voice. They arrived on a perfect San Francisco afternoon. I watched through the window as the taxi pulled up, and my family emerged, their East Coast formality immediately out of place in our California neighborhood. My mother was scrutinizing the house before she even reached the front walkway, no doubt estimating its value. Alexander squeezed my shoulder. "Ready?" I nodded, smoothing down my simple linen dress. "As I'll ever be." Opening the door to my family felt surreal, like worlds colliding that were never meant to intersect. My father hugged me warmly. My mother air-kissed my cheeks, her eyes already darting past me to assess the interior. Layla hung back, uncertain of her welcome. Ethan looked like he wished he could disappear. "Welcome to our home," Alexander said smoothly, taking control of the awkward moment. "We're so glad you could come early to spend some time with us before the party." The tour of the house produced exactly the reactions I had anticipated. My father was genuinely appreciative of the architecture and views. My mother's expression shifted from calculated assessment to poorly concealed shock as she registered the obvious signs of wealth in the original artwork designer furniture and state-of-the-art technology seamlessly integrated throughout. "This is all so unexpected," she managed finally. Vivian never shared details about her life here. "I believe in letting actions speak rather than words," I replied, meeting her eyes directly. "Something I learned growing up." The barb landed subtly, and for once my mother had no ready response. Dinner that evening was a masterclass in tension. Alexander, ever the gracious host, kept the conversation flowing with questions about Connecticut and memories of his own East Coast college days. I watched my mother transform before my eyes, becoming more deferential and flattering with each revelation of Alexander's success and connections. "You know, Alexander, Vivian has always had such an eye for potential," she said at one point, as if she had spent years praising my talents instead of dismissing them. "We always knew she would find her place in the creative world." Alexander's hand found mine under the table as he replied, "Vivian's talent is exceptional. I consider myself fortunate that she chose to share her vision with me and my company." Later that night, as we prepared for bed, Alexander asked, "How are you holding up?" "Better than I expected," I admitted. "There's something empowering about having them here on my terms in the life I've built without them." The following evening, our home transformed into the elegant venue I had envisioned. String lights twinkled in the garden trees. A small orchestra played on the lower terrace. Waitstaff circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I wore a simple cream silk gown that Alexander said made me look like a modern goddess. He was handsome in a tailored suit, his presence drawing attention wherever he moved through the crowd. The guest list was a who's who of tech innovators, designers, artists, and entrepreneurs. Many had flown in specifically to celebrate with us. I watched my mother's expression as she realized exactly who she was mingling with, people whose names she had read in business magazines and society pages. Layla pulled me aside during a quiet moment. "Your life is incredible, Viv," she said, a complicated mix of emotions in her voice. "You really made it." "It's not about making it," I replied. "It's about finding what truly matters to me and building around that." She glanced across the terrace to where Ethan was standing awkwardly alone looking at his phone. "I think I made a mistake," she confessed quietly. "Which one?" I asked, not unkindly. "All of it." Her eyes filled with tears. "Listening to Mom, taking what was yours, thinking that the path she laid out would lead to happiness." "Are things really that bad with Ethan?" I asked. She shrugged slightly. "We look perfect on paper. Successful broker husband, charity committee wife, colonial house with the white picket fence. Mom got exactly what she wanted." She twisted her wedding ring. "But we have nothing in common except our mutual regret." I felt a surprising wave of compassion for my sister. "It's never too late to change direction, Layla." "Maybe not for you," she said. "You were always braver than the rest of us." The highlight of the evening came when Alexander clinked his glass for everyone's attention. Standing beside me on the upper terrace with the sun setting behind us and the lights of San Francisco beginning to twinkle below, he raised his glass. "5 years ago, I met a woman who challenged me to see beyond what was expected to what was possible," he said, his voice carrying across the now quiet garden. "Vivian didn't just transform my company's visual identity, she transformed my understanding of what partnership truly means. In business and in life, she has brought authenticity, courage, and beauty to everything we create together." He turned to me, his eyes filled with such genuine love that my throat tightened. "To my wife, my partner, and my inspiration, thank you for saying yes, not just to me, but to the vision of what we could build together." As the applause rippled through the gathering, I caught sight of my mother's face. She was staring at us with an expression I had never seen before, genuine shock tinged with something that might have been regret. Beside her, my father was smiling, a glint of what looked like pride in his eyes. Ethan stood further back, his expression unreadable as he watched the man who had everything he could have had if he had chosen differently. Later, as the party continued around us, Ethan approached Alexander and me. "Congratulations," he said stiffly. "You've built something remarkable together." "Thank you," Alexander replied with the easy confidence of a man who has never questioned his worth or his choices. Ethan hesitated, then added, "I hope you know how fortunate you are." Alexander's arm tightened around my waist. "I know exactly how fortunate I am," he said, his gaze holding mine. "Some people spend their whole lives looking for what I found the moment Vivian walked into my conference room." As the evening wound down, I found myself standing with Alexander on the edge of the garden, watching our guests mingle against the backdrop of the city lights. "Happy?" he asked, pressing a kiss to my temple. "Beyond words," I replied. Then taking his hand, I placed it gently on my stomach. Especially now that we'll be 3 instead of 2. His expression of wonder as he processed my words was everything I had hoped for. "You're sure?" he whispered. I nodded. 12 weeks. I wanted to wait until tonight to tell you. His joyous laugh drew attention from nearby guests, but neither of us cared. In that moment, watching my past and present collide in the most unexpected ways, I felt a sense of completion I had never thought possible when I fled Connecticut 5 years earlier. The betrayal that had shattered my world had ultimately led me to build a stronger, more authentic life than I could have imagined. As I looked at my mother's calculating expression, my sister's wistful regret, and Ethan's undisguised envy, I felt nothing but gratitude for the path they had unwittingly set me on. 5 years have passed since that fateful day when I overheard my mother convincing my boyfriend to marry my sister instead of me. What seemed like the end of my world became the beginning of a journey that led me to true love success beyond my wildest dreams, and most importantly, the confidence to be unapologetically myself. The pain of betrayal taught me resilience. The loss of what I thought I wanted opened the door to what I truly needed. And the journey from heartbreak to healing showed me strengths I never knew I possessed. Today, as I sit in the sunlit nursery of our San Francisco home, watching Alexander gently rock our 6-month-old daughter Margaret, named for the grandmother who believed in me. When no one else did, I understand that sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the greatest blessings. My relationship with my family remains complicated. My father visits occasionally, delighting in his role as grandfather. My mother sends expensive gifts, but maintains a careful distance, her pride still wounded by the revelation that the daughter she dismissed has achieved more than she ever imagined possible. Layla and Ethan separated last year, each pursuing their own path toward authentic happiness. Alexander and I continue to build both our business and our family with the same values of honesty, creativity, and mutual respect that brought us together. Our foundation, named for grandmother Margaret, provides art education and scholarships to young women from challenging backgrounds, helping them find their voices and pursue their dreams. I often think about what I would tell my younger self, standing heartbroken in that apartment doorway, listening to her mother betray her. I would tell her that what feels like an ending is often just a beginning in disguise, that the path to happiness rarely follows a straight line, and that the greatest revenge isn't success or wealth, but the freedom to become fully, joyfully yourself. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led you somewhere better? Or have you had to start over completely to find your true path? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the darkest moments lead to the brightest futures. Thank you for joining me on this journey of heartbreak and healing. Remember, the family you build by choice can be stronger than the family you're born into. Until next time, this is Vivian wishing you the courage to follow your own authentic path.